Well, good afternoon here on the East Coast. Hope you're having a nice lunch in the center of the country, and good morning to our West Coast friends. My name is Christine Nicholas, and CEO, founder of People Science. If you haven't joined us before, welcome for the first time. Just to bring you up to date before I introduce our guests, we're having this webinar because we've been in close contact with HR and even more specifically, our talent acquisition friends, clients of People Science, friends of People Science, and pretty much everybody I know and many of the people on the phone know. Moving forward, we will continue to hear your requests on what you want to talk about and what you want to learn about. The one thing that I have discovered over the last 2 weeks, not only do a lot of people have a lot of things in common, there are so many people in the talent acquisition field that can answer questions that can simplify our lives. So just the game share going back and forth. And it doesn't matter if you're in a small, medium, large company, if you're in a startup mode or in a more mature company, the information swap has been pretty astounding. So if you think that what you know is novel, we don't like that word novel, right? But if you think what you know is elementary, I will tell you it very likely is not elementary to somebody else. So sharing is really important. Some logistics at the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a Q&A. You're more than welcome to supply questions. We're going to get to those in just a few minutes. I'd like to thank you so much for me being able to say I have now invited 100 people to my bedroom. I've never been able to say that before. And Eileen, who raised your hand there, Eileen, who I was talking to yesterday, as we were sounding this out, we were saying, you know, we should we dress like we normally dress? Should we dress like we're in our last round of interviews? Should we dress like we're on board? So I got elected to put a suit on. Thank you again for allowing me to dress the upper part of my body. I certainly appreciate that. So with that, this is what these are the people that we have on. Jessica Roberto, can you raise your hand? Jessica,
hi, good afternoon.
There she is. Jess is Director of Process Engineering and Design. She's been spending a lot of time helping our clients, and we internally at People Science have been working with remote workers and hiring remotely for years now. To the bottom right of my screen is Lindsay Roundtree.
Hi, good afternoon.
Lindsay is our Director of Recruitment and has her life in the last 2 weeks as far as learning more and sharing more and implementing, actually being in the weeds, hands rolled or sleeves rolled up on the keyboard, teaching people how to onboard and get people hired. I asked Lindsay and Jess and Brian to my upper left-hand corner, who is our Director of IT and Master Network Engineer, right, Brian?
Sure.
Because we have had to modify a lot of things that we do, not so much just for People Science, but for our clients in this process. So frankly, these guys know a lot more than I do, and they helped create this guide sheet that we're going to go over in a second and some points. And then finally, there's our Eileen Kowalski. I have known Eileen for years. She's one of the smartest people in talent acquisition I've ever met.
I did pay her to say that, by the way.
No, you didn't. But I'm going to send you, I'm going to Vimeo you a bill. I'm really glad that Eileen is here because she is head of global talent acquisition for an international company that employs 38,000, Eileen?
35. Actually, I'm the head of global talent acquisition ops, so slightly different. I don't want to misconceive anybody, but yeah, we have about 35,000 employees globally.
And how many of them are remote?
35,000.
Okay, and I don't want to steal her thunder because she's going to tell us how her life has changed, even though she's accustomed to working remotely. So Jess, do you want to pull up the guide sheet so we can go over what the format is, and then I'm going to turn this over. Look, I can't take the jacket at all. I'm like undoing.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen.
While we're waiting, raise your hand and let me know if you're in your pajamas. Or actually, how many people are in half pajamas?
I'm actually fully dressed today.
I see you raising your hand. Hi, Denise. I hope they're pretty. That's my dog, Mickey, by the way.
Hi, Mickey.
We're keeping it real because we really don't have a choice at this point. Okay,
Right.
so this is the guide sheet that we created. Along with the guide sheet, today we're going to share a lot of additional information. So this is a living, breathing document. It will be circulated out as well as the entire webinar to all the attendees, and we will be sending this to other people who've requested it too. So with that, if you take a look at the top, we've broken this down into actions that need to be taken. And then on our left-hand side, the most common tools that we use, additional tools that we're recommending. And by the way, if you know another tool that you'd like to mention, go ahead and raise your hand. Jess, you're going to keep an eye on those and maybe bring them up as we go along. And then our additional insights and info. Again, if you have anything to add, you can either wait to the end or you can send it in through the question and answer and say, hey, try this one or that one. We won't get to the questions and answers till the end. So, you know, if you want to go into the chat and let us know along the way, that'll be great too. So Jess, you want to take us through?
Sure. So as Christine mentioned, we've been speaking to a lot of the TA leaders and the community and a lot of the people just in the field right now dealing with everything that we've been facing with remote hiring amidst this crisis. So you can see here we have employee files. So when you're onboarding someone, hiring them for the first time, of course you have that all important new hire paperwork to complete and store. So most commonly, of course, people are using their HRIS that they already have in place, an ATS system. Even some companies, smaller businesses are using Excel spreadsheets just to track and manage the employees and their data. Additional tools that we've also heard being used would include FileCloud, OneDrive, and Dropbox. So with those tools in place, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with those, there are some really important additional insights to look at for those pieces. And panelists, feel free to jump in, anything you want to add. One of the things that we spoke about with some of the TA leaders was really making sure that even though everything seems to be amidst chaos and you're kind of just running with things and being flexible, still really important to keep in mind that compliance piece, particularly when it comes to GDPR regulations. Everything, you know, laws, regulations, they're still in place. They're still applying. There are some recent exceptions with the I-9, which I think Lindsay will touch on. Just making sure that even though you're doing things off the hip and quickly, keep those regulations in mind.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was gonna say, I think that piece is really important. I know, especially the GDPR piece, that's been a big challenge for everybody this year, as it's, you know, we just passed or approaching actually, was it the 2-year mark that it's live? May, I think will be 2 years. And GDPR is an area of concern. It's a big change from how we used to operate to how we operate now in terms of data privacy. I think it's critically important that just because our worlds are disrupted, that we do not, you know, we don't forget about that piece, right? This isn't a time for us to just get sloppy and forget that we need to remain compliant and be cognizant of people's data and protecting it. And so that, I would say, huge emphasis should remain on ensuring that your data is compliant, even though you may be doing virtual onboarding for new hires.
Absolutely, great point.
And they have made some exceptions to those I-9 laws that Jess was referring to. So because we're considered under a national emergency, the exception there is a 90-day extension period to validate I-9s in person. So you do still have to collect their IDs to validate the I-9, and you can do that electronically, fax, email, however your new hire feels comfortable giving you that information. And then in section 2, you simply notate unavailable to validate due to COVID-19. And then within 3 days of returning to normal work provisions for your employees, then in those 3 days, that's when you will actually need to verify that information in person. So there is that 60-day extension in place right now for that, so we can continue to board and continue to be cognizant of our employees' privacy. However, that may change if there are extensions in people having to continue to work from home. So there is a good step in place, and I have some links that are available to all of you that I'm more than willing to share that will kind of break that down for you and really give you step by step on how to complete those I-9s.
Okay.
Great. And Lindsay, do we have a document or we can share with the group when we send the guide sheet and yeah, we'll just get those notes together that you just talked about. So Lindsay will share this, right?
Yes, there is an announcement from the Department of Labor as well that explains the I-9 exceptions. We'll be happy to send that one out to you.
Yeah.
I know, and also one thing that we deal with at People Science, and a lot of our, and especially Eileen, deals with is when you're hiring people remotely, but across different states and international lines. So one of the things to keep in mind is that there are different laws between state and federal. So making sure that you have a strong HR person in place or someone that's keeping track of that for things such as, you know, PTO requirements, especially with the new sick leave laws that have been put into place, you know, people working overtime, just making sure you're following all those laws and regulations. That also brings me to another point that we wanted to talk about. So when you're also hiring across state lines, making sure that you have the appropriate insurances in place, and also making sure you're aware of tax rates that are going to change from state to state and then from country to country. Having something
And even from municipality, for example, we had never had an employee in the city of Philadelphia. We're located here in New Jersey. This is quite a few years ago now. And we received a reoccurring bill from the city of Philadelphia every 3 weeks for $300. We did not realize, and then we got hit with a lot of penalties. We did not realize that Philadelphia considers itself a municipality and just bills $300 to anybody who has an employee in place. So, and even tiny communities I've seen like Shog Holes, Alabama, that has their own little caveat that goes to their municipality. So I think some of the questions we see is where are we considering this employee working?
Exactly. I know People Science, we've had some employees working in San Francisco. They have regulations in regards to commuters and how much they're entitled to for reimbursements for commuting into the city. So there's all, you know, different things you need to track and be mindful of.
Yeah, so those from an expense perspective, all of those things are important.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that we are in extraordinary times. There are times, and because so much of what we do is time sensitive, we often have had to pull the trigger, make sure our workers' comp is in place, and then deal with the aftermath. So if you've got a really good candidate and they're in San Francisco and you're in Ohio, and you don't have all the information you need to pull the trigger, you do have time to figure that. Most of it's going to come at the end of the year with taxes. So if you want to learn your large expense, it really is going to be your workers' compensation and then your corporate tax. Other than that, everything else can pretty much be figured out after.
Okay, great. So that's our employee file piece. So once we've had all the paperwork in place, we know our employees are ready to go and everything's been validated. Let's talk about getting them set up so they can actually do the work. I know Brian, our IT director, has been our savior in helping us get that done at People Science. And typically what we've seen other people doing is sending out equipment, right? So those laptops, those cell phones, anything that you need to be able to do your work. People typically use UPS, FedEx, United States Postal Service. Brian, I'll let you touch on this a little bit since it's your area of expertise.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, trying to obviously get equipment to new hires is crucial. Obviously, you know, kind of staying in touch with HR, hiring managers, and kind of trying to give them a line of sight as to, you know, how long is that going to take? How long is it going to be before we can actually get equipment? And especially right now where you have carriers that are you know, kind of bogged down almost like it's the holidays with everybody shipping, you know, that can kind of, you know, be a little bit more interesting to play with, because if you have to start budgeting for, you know, trying to get things shipped overnight or things like that, you know, you're really going to maybe have a larger cost than what you were really expecting to have, just so that you can make sure that that person can start on time. And, you know, going along with that is, you know, making sure the equipment that they have, especially being remote, cameras being a huge thing right now, making sure that you have a good camera that, you know, can, you know, go along and do those remote meetings, and especially, you know, the remote starts and onboarding and things like that. And I know just from us trying to find some for our own employees that can be a challenge. It was pretty interesting trying to even just come across some of those because everybody is doing the same thing. So it's really interesting, how that kind of plays into everything else. Of course, you have the UPS and the FedEx, and if you have, if you're a little bit larger company and you have a good relationship with your vendors, a lot of times you can get, your company images directly to the vendors, and they'll go ahead and they'll image those systems for you ahead of time. That way they can actually come directly from the vendors themselves. So that kind of, eases off a little bit. But of course, IT definitely plays a huge, huge role in making sure that everybody can do what they need to do, and making sure that, logistically they're keeping in line with, again, with HR and with the hiring managers, and making sure that everybody, has an easy transition to a new hire.
Yeah, I'm going to just kind of jump in here. So one of the things that we've been working on, the company I'm with now, and we're used to, we hire remote workers all the time, but we typically, historically, have had in-person onboarding country by country. And so this is a little bit of an adaptation for us, because now we're having to do these virtual onboarding sessions. One of the things that our TA teams have had to very quickly do is we've had to actually create new reports within our applicant tracking system to be able to determine somebody's accept date, not their start date, right? Because if we're first provisioning equipment on their start date, they're not getting it for probably another 2 weeks. And so we've had to very quickly create some custom reports to be able to identify, region by region or area by area, who is starting on which date, what's the date they accepted, what type of equipment do they need. We're IT consulting, our consultants have a variety of different platforms that they might work on. And so we've had to create these custom reports, which took some time, right? We had to work with our ATS vendor to have those created, to be able to pull the data that we need so that we're provisioning our equipment, getting it out in the appropriate amount of time. The other thing that I would say is kind of critically important that not everybody always thinks about is ensuring that your new hire has the appropriate bandwidth from a Wi-Fi perspective or internet perspective, right? So that if they do need to log on and they're on all day, keep in mind that the new normal is that everybody's children are home, spouses, significant others, parents, whoever, dogs, cats, birds, whatever, everybody's home. So the bandwidth on your system is going to be a little bit slower than normal. I've actually been experiencing that in my own home. I typically work from home, but now I have 5 other people that are home all day long. So just making sure that employees are aware that they may have to make a call to their service provider to up the bandwidth of their internet so that they can get on a video interview without it crackling up and disconnecting. But also, are they comfortable? Are you sending the appropriate information for them so that when they have their machine, they know how to log on? Do they have to set up any, codes or VPNs to be able to access information? How are you getting those people, your new hires acquainted with your technology? And so those are all things that companies really need to keep in the forefront of their minds as they're moving from this in-person onboarding, where you have somebody that's typically holding your new hire's hand, to this virtual onboarding where somebody's sitting maybe in their kitchen or their bedroom, like Christine, and having to figure out how to work for a company by themselves.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I see Brian nodding his head. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think we've definitely experienced that throughout these last few weeks of, where, even just where are you in the house, even just maybe moving to another location helps, increase, your ability to be able to stay on. But yeah, I mean, that struggle is definitely real, especially when you've got a ton of other people home and everybody's trying to do, especially if you've got children in their home, they're all doing, remote homeschooling right now. That definitely at a point can definitely bog down your networks, and yeah, reaching out to your providers is huge. I mean, even if I'm sure they would understand at this point in time what's going on, so they know,
Yeah, I mean, and let's be honest, right? I don't know about you guys. I have 2 teenagers. They're not doing their work. They're sitting and playing YouTube videos, which is eating up a lot of bandwidth. just keeping it real, right? That they're not sitting on a computer. They're not sitting on a computer reading a lesson plan for 8 hours. I mean, the reality is there's other stuff that's streaming that's taking up bandwidth.
Well, I think when it comes to having compassion for the people you're interviewing, right? So I thought I told everybody in the tri-state area and shut down the house. And in case you didn't hear, the gardeners showed up. I thought we were at shelter at home. So I've just been walking around shutting windows and waving like stop. So that it didn't, I mean, these are the kind of times that we're living in. And I know we're going to get to that in a minute too. But one of the things that Eileen and I were talking about is I'm wearing a suit. Now I wouldn't wear that to do a webinar with you guys, frankly. We did this to say different appearances for different folks. And as we move along the guide sheet, we'll talk a little bit more about putting compassion around the fact and understanding that it really is a new way of looking at people and learning about them very quickly, things that you would never know, right?
Yeah, I think it is really important that employers kind of adapt to conforming to the new normal, right? The new normal is that people are home, everybody's home. If you are able to work, you are working from your house, which in some cases is how, that's how I work every day. But for some companies, that's completely new and different. And you need to, I think, forget about what you used to know about sitting across the desk from somebody in a suit with your pad and taking notes. You're now having a video chat with them. And guess what? They may not be wearing a suit. They may not, have, like, I'm in my office, everyone's in a different situation. You have to be able to kind of release with love, right? And know that the new normal is that you're going to be probably conversing with somebody who may or may not be in their gym shorts and a t-shirt. You may see pictures on the wall like we see with Brian, and that's okay, right? And just because I'm sitting here in a t-shirt doesn't mean that I can't do my work, right? If you closed your eyes, you wouldn't know what I was wearing. And so we have to really approach both interviewing and onboarding from that perspective, knowing that there needs to be a little bit of flexibility. And like Christine said, compassion around the fact that we're all adapting to this new normal, right? So
I'm really coaching our hiring managers through this because there's so much right now that we're all learning.
Absolutely.
And I think that the patience level is minimal. Some of the behaviors, I mean, we're seeing, the CEO of Wells Fargo, the chairman and founder of Paychex making comments that they think everybody should return to work soon. And because they're billionaires, they understand the flow of money and more people are going to be in dire straits if we don't, and then the outcry from so many other people is like, you're sacrificing lives for this. So that kind of information coming across and how that's transmitted. Think about this from the candidate's perspective. I'm going through an interview. I may be in financial straits. I don't know what's happening to my 401k. I like the company that I'm with, but I know I need another opportunity. And their CEO just made a statement that doesn't relate to me. So watching communications, but also understanding that the person you're interviewing has all that climbing through their brain right now. I mean, most of the knowledge workers, right, the people who can work from home are facing so many of those things right now that I think we need to say to our hiring managers, I know you're learning, but let's, the word compassion again, and maybe empathy might be a better word, like empathy around all these moving pieces.
Yeah, and I mean, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday, Christine, right? I think one of the things that employers need to really think about is right now is the time that you should be ensuring that your brand perception in the market is stellar, right? And what I mean by that is, so everybody's hiring demand probably dropped down, right? Where it's a great time to pipeline and start engaging with the external candidate population. And the example that I used yesterday was, we recruit for IT consultants with really niche skill sets. And I work for a relatively small fish in a very big pond. And somebody who a couple of months ago might have turned us down for $10,000 difference because, in base salary, because a bigger company can offer a little bit more, is going to really start looking at how are you as an employer handling this global pandemic crisis? How are you treating your employees? How are you caring for them? How are you making sure that, that you're there to support your employees and they are coming first? Those are all things that you should be talking to your talent acquisition teams and your hiring managers about to make sure that everybody is kind of singing from the same sheet of music, right? We should all be focusing on candidate experience, white glove experience, candidate engagement, and ensuring that when this is all over, that candidate that might have turned us down 6 months ago is going to come back and take a look and go, you know what? I have 2 offers on the table. One's from the smaller little, company, and one's from this big, huge Fortune 500 organization. But I really like the way this smaller company handled this situation. And that's the kind of company I want to work for, right? This is a perfect opportunity for us as talent acquisition and HR professionals to be able to tell the story about what our organization is doing for us and why do you really want to come work for this company? And that's going to go a long way. Candidates are going to remember that 6 months from now, 12 months from now, when they're looking for a new opportunity. That's what they're going to think about.
And not to play the devil's advocate, but playing the devil's advocate, I learned a long time ago that there's a job for every person and a person for every job. And there's jobs that I would never consider because the culture doesn't fit me. But I think in these times, and as we get to know people even more intimately, before we even hire them, we can know what their bedroom looks like, right? Who you are as an organization comes through. And so there are going to be employees that say, yeah, this matters to me, and the way you handled it. There's another very large company that put some things out like, stop calling us, all you vendors, don't bother us if you need to go this way. And then, it's indicative kind of their culture too. So I was watching this and then, talking to some people that were considering applying, and some are saying, yeah, I'm good with that. And others are saying, never in a million years. So I think you can't be afraid or try and change the culture or get your hiring managers to do that, but kind of open their eyes to, well, you're going to know Sally or Harry. You're going to know more about them, onboarding them this way and making an offer to them this way, in those first few hours than you would have in the first 6 months.
Yeah, I think, just not to kind of belabor this topic, but one of the other things that I think is really critical that we all think about is ensuring that we're engaging our change management teams through this process, right? This is hard. Change is hard. And if it wasn't hard, there wouldn't be an entire career vertical around change management and communication. But I do think it's important. So I partner very closely with our change management lead to ensure that everything that we're doing around this pandemic and messaging to our employees and our candidates and whoever clients is consistent. And so I would say one of the things that you should not forget as an employer is if you have a change management lead on your team, they should be running hip and hip with you.
Well,
absolutely. Okay. So let's look at the third column. I think we're halfway through, just to give everyone timing. So in the offering piece, I think this piece, again, really relays into what we were just speaking about. So making sure that your branding's out there, that you are representing your company so that others would want to work for you. And really just doing that by example. So how are you treating your current employees right now? So when you get to the offer stage, being able to remotely offer someone, of course, a lot of people really like DocuSign and products like Adobe. Lindsay, did you want to add anything into this? Because I know this is your world of expertise at People Science.
Sure. So I think that every recruiter is like,
and can you lean in a little bit? Yeah,
sure.
We're having a hard time hearing you.
I think as recruiters, we're really thankful for our applicant tracking systems right now. Don't get me wrong. I'm like every other recruiter out there. I have a love-hate relationship with all of my applicant tracking systems. However, most of them do have the ability for us to send out offers and receive electronic signatures back for them. But if you're not using an ATS and you don't have this function because you're small or it's just not part of what you all do every day, that's okay. PDF your files, send them that way. Your new hires will be able to drop in an electric signature fairly easily to get that going. And then, we do have those worst case scenarios where candidates just can't get the technology to work on their end or they're struggling through it to sign the actual documents. We are seeing candidates send a letter acknowledging their acceptance via email and then mailing out a hard copy. I really think that's worst case scenario. I really do think most of our new hires and candidates have the capability of doing this, but our ATSs and those e-signature tools are really crucial through the offer process right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one thing I would say is just around this. So if we're thinking about this from a global perspective, there are countries that do actually require a wet signature on an offer. An electronic signature is not valid. So to that point, Lindsay, right? If somebody can't, well, essentially they can't sign it electronically. They're going to have to physically print it. Sometimes they actually have to print it and sign in somebody's presence.
Right.
But making sure that, if they are printing it out and signing, that if they don't have a scanner at home to be able to send it back to you, you can download, a scanning app right on your phone and be able to send that back as a PDF. I think that's really important, especially outside of the US where wet signatures are sometimes required.
Great point. And those apps are super simple to use on your phone to send them over.
Okay. So once we get those offers accepted, we need to start onboarding those new hires. I know a lot of companies are still doing background check, work verifications, drug screenings, and some of the common tools that we've seen out there, things like skill survey for reference checks. That's been personally one of my favorites. We can do those automatically online. So it's a system that was created by psychologists based on the types of positions that people are candidates for. You do a reference check. There are already questions in the system. The candidate puts their references into the system. Emails are shot out to their references. The references complete them on their own time and send them back. So it's very flexible. Anyone can do it at any time of the day. And then as the employer, you get reports sent back to you. That's been a big time saver. I've also think that this is a good time for employers to really look and see what is actually still needed for their verification. So for example, do you really need a drug screening for some positions still? It's a good chance to go back and review what you're verifying and what you think is needed today, because sometimes those can be out of date. I did see yesterday that there are still some drug screenings going on. So medical offices are still open. It's kind of a gray area though, right? Because some of these candidates don't want to go out and go do the drug screening. So I think being able to offer the candidate the position contingent on clearing those checks and screenings when it's safe for them to go out and do that is a good idea. Does anyone else have anything to add, or have you heard anything else about background verifications and drug screenings?
I have heard that many small municipalities, when it comes to crim checks, and I think the state of Pennsylvania in particular is struggling right now because a lot of government offices are working with a skeleton crew, if at all. Right. So I think we're definitely experiencing a holdup in criminal background checks. So making your start even contingent, changing that offer letter and making, contingent, and they can start and then contingent on, comes back with a problem a month from now, because some of these crim checks are, and it's that we expect to get worse, right? So it may not be there right now in your community, but it just depends on who you're hiring and where they are. But the chances of getting all crim checks back at this point is decreasing minute by minute.
Absolutely. Okay. So once your employee's been cleared, we're now ready to get them started. They want to get moving, and we have to get them trained. I know Lindsay and I at People Science, we work closely together to make sure that our new hires are trained. We build out, and Brian helps us as well as Christine, build out a really detailed training schedule for our employees. So they know for the first 2 weeks what they'll be doing every day, pretty much every hour of the day, what they'll be training on and who they'll be meeting with. So I think sending that out prior to their start date's a good idea. Get them prepared and ready. Having their logons, thank you, Brian, ready to go before they start is very helpful. One thing that I really like is when you have new hires that are remote, it's difficult at times to get them acclimated to your company culture. One of the things I think that you can do is send them some new hire swag if you have it. You don't even really have to send it now. You can have the supplier just drop ship it directly to their house. So there's nothing you have to do except go online and order something. But I think, having that, we have these little Einsteins in our office, having the little People Science Einstein on your desk, or even a t-shirt or a pen, just reminds you of your company and who you're with. Making sure that you have a handbook ahead of time to give to your new employees so they understand the guidelines and what it's like to work at your company is important. And also during your orientation with your new hires, being really clear about who their points of contact are. So having these face-to-face meetings with them on Zoom and having those points of contact. So who do I need to reach out to for payroll? Who can I talk to about my IT issues? Things like that. It's really important that they have a face and a name and contact information so they don't feel like they're in the dark when they're facing challenges. One of the things that we've also done at People Science with our remote employees is on their first day, we send them a welcome letter and an email, and one of those comes directly from Christine. So it's a nice introduction to the company. She's very open door policy, so she's always there to talk to you. So she wants the new employees to know that they're always welcome to come to her. We also send them a detailed sheet of all of their logins and directions for communication. So we use Slack internally at People Science. We give them a link. This is how you use Slack. This is your login for Slack, just so they have everything on one sheet. So it makes it effortless for them when they're looking for that information. One of the things that we've also started doing is using video over email. So again, giving that face-to-face contact with your remote employees really helps to build the relationship. They get to learn who you are and what your facial expressions mean. I think it's really hard when you're going back and forth through email a lot. Things can be misconstrued. So it's good to have that contact and interaction.
I
Lindsay,
also think there's a lot of value too to being able, like, you don't have to have your CEO of Continental Airlines walking around with a fancy background saying, welcome to,
right.
did I say to United Airlines? I always think of them because I see them on the plane. This makes it so much more real, right? Because even though I can't always meet everybody, I can send them, even if I don't have like a live call with them, I can send them something saying, hey, Jason, glad you started. I'm Christine, reach out to me. Let's plan to connect. It's a lot more real. So I think it gives management more visibility and just better visibility, better connection.
Yeah, one of the things that we started doing is, and this actually happened, we did this before the whole COVID-19 crisis, but it's proven to be an invaluable tool for us, is we established a global buddy system. So all of our new hires, while they get their list of individuals that they should meet with in their first 2 weeks of employment, and they get all their logons, they're also assigned a peer buddy. Maybe in another part of the world, it doesn't really matter, but that person's really there to kind of help them acclimate into this new organization, especially when you're remote, right? So it's somebody you can tap who's at peer level, maybe not even necessarily in the same department that you work in, just to say, oh God, I'm really struggling with whatever. I don't know how to log onto this piece of technology, or, what's the best approach to X? I think that's really important. It's difficult when you join a new organization to adapt to a different culture. It's even more difficult to do that when you're not physically in the office with somebody. So having somebody at peer level that is assigned to kind of be your point of contact to help you acclimate in is fantastic. And I agree with you, Jess. I think the video it's so much more personal. You get to know people. I mean, my coworkers, they know my dogs, they know my kids, and it's like you're sitting in the room with them, right? It makes it real.
How do you determine who's buddy? I mean, how's that? I think is a great idea.
Yeah, we do it. Typically, the business or the local HR business partner will let us know who the assigned buddy is. We're onboarding thousands of people over the course of a year. So we try to make sure that they are sometimes in the same department, or it may not be in the same location, but same department. Could be across the globe, or it could just be somebody that is, in the same time zone, right, and has the capacity to be able to be somebody's buddy. We've actually outlined it where there's kind of a cap, right? You can't be a buddy for 12 people, because then you spend all your time being a buddy and not doing any work. But we try to rotate it around, and there's some interesting parameters that we put into place that really help the buddy understand what their responsibilities are, and the new employee understand like what should you be going to your buddy for versus your manager.
Awesome idea. If you have any outline on that you can share, that would be great. Don't want to take your proprietary stuff.
I'll see what I could
Yeah, if you have anything.
pull together.
We could at least get some comments in there too.
Right.
I love
And
that
I know-
idea. I mean, we've done that in our real geographies, right? So we always have somebody who's kind of in our management team. Of course, we're a much smaller organization that, keeps an eye on the new hire and where they are. But I like the idea of taking it out of management and saying, I'm your friend at work, your work friend kind of thing.
Yeah. I'll tell you another benefit to that. So there's like kind of this underlying benefit of assigning a buddy is it gives individuals that are not necessarily people managers the opportunity to become a mentor and kind of dip their toes into, I wouldn't say managing, but being a mentor for somebody else in the organization. So it's kind of a nice stepping stone to somebody who thinks, maybe one day I want to be a people manager. What does that entail?
Mhm.
Love it.
Great. So looking at communications, there's so many different tools and things that we can use right now. I know personally, I feel like I'm becoming a Zoom expert as well as my son. He's been doing homeschooling on that. So we have that in common. Slack is a big one, GoToMeeting, G Suite, Same Page. Also, other things that you can use to communicate internally, of course, your company intranet, making sure that it's up to date and it's relevant, it's providing information that your employees can use, as well as using a SharePoint. One of the things that we've done with our remote workers is creating a digital newsletter. So including, something short, doesn't have to be complicated, but something that has current events within the company, pictures of social events, special luncheons that you've done. That's always a good thing to share. Keeping people tied in, so what's going on in the office if they're not there. Also, leadership videos have been useful, and we've heard a lot of people are doing those now. As Eileen mentioned, a non-management buddy system or a mentor to have. And throughout, I mean, we've made a big point internally at People Science when we decided to put everyone remotely due to this health crisis is we really kept to our team meetings. So the first week we started meeting every morning just to, one, say hi, and then two, to really make sure that everyone had direction. If there were any challenges that we could face together, we can address those. Because when you're in the office, it's really easy to just say, hey, Lindsay, I'm going to need some help with this today. When you're working remotely and you're in your office siloed, you might be a little bit more hesitant to call someone or send them an email or Slack them. So keeping those team meetings is really important. Also keeping your one-on-ones with, your team. So making sure that you're staying in touch with what their workload's like, what they're experiencing, and how they're dealing with being a remote employee. It's really different for a lot of people. So staying in touch and having a pulse on that's important, as well as any new trainings that you might have. So for example, we are always using Zoom and GoToMeetings, but a lot of our team members may not have been doing that. So they may not have been initiating Zoom meetings. Christine actually had a really great idea. We did a contest last week. Who had the most Zoom meetings that they sent out? So giving them training on those things and then encouraging them to use it is really good to keep communication going during these types of remote situations.
You only get one shot to onboard somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So keeping and trying to do it remotely complicates things. So really keeping them close to you or their buddy. And I think to alleviating some of the stress of managers. I mean, in these times in particular, managers are really learning what they're made of and doing a million things at once. So I like the idea of the buddy helping. And their TA leader, if many of you, and I know a lot of ours, follow all the way through to at least the first month of employment. So if you're going to be that guy, be that guy. Check in with that person, have the buddy, but keep them close at hand. I don't think when you have a new start, a day should go by when they don't hear from and physically, do some type of a virtual call with somebody from the company, because you're really kind of leaving them out there on their own. Even if they don't seem like the type of person who needs it, it's good for the company's liabilities as well. So I think really keeping it out there is important.
Absolutely. I think to kind of tag on to that, it's making sure you're accessible, whether you're a manager, a people manager, an individual contributor. It's, I think there's this misconstrued perception that when you work from home, you're not working. I actually think I work more when I'm from home because you're not distracted by things in the office. But for some of these, or for some organizations that don't typically embrace working from home or working remote, making sure that you're accessible, right? And you're on top of things. And just because you're sitting in your home versus sitting in the office, you should you should be just as responsive to your coworkers and colleagues and employees as possible. Same, there should be really no difference, no disruption.
And maybe even asking people when you bring them on board, the quandary is, for years now has been, is it easier should I text you? Should I call you? Should I Zoom you? How, what's the best way to get a hold of you? And kind of knowing that in advance. Because I know that's a curve, right? That's a learning curve. When you start to work with somebody new, you're not sure, are they better in person? Yeah, it's amazing to me as I used to walk around the office, you would see people communicating through email that are sitting next to each other.
Yeah.
So everybody has a different and preferred way of communicating, understanding what that is up front, I think. And sometimes it surprises us, I think, to figure that out, right? That, oh, I didn't realize I'm the guy who prefers to be text, or I'm still stuck in the email loops, whatever the case is. So some really cool information. I just want to go over a couple of notes too. Eileen said to me yesterday, this is evolving to the new norm. We wanted to give you this simple grid because hiring remotely is different, but it's not all that different. It's the same things that you're doing and the same kind of culture and the same kind of commitment. You're just going to translate it into this new virtual world. The faster we can become accustomed to that, the faster we can keep progressing, because this isn't, for knowledge workers in particular, this is not going away. Some of the super tech companies have never allowed remote workers. And some of them, like Yahoo, have remote workers, and then they brought them all inside. IBM did the same thing. It's going to be really interesting to see, now that they're getting accustomed to onboarding, and because they are onboarding and they are hiring people remotely, if that's going to change. I'm sure that it's going to keep expanding. And if you're the guy ahead of that, right? So even if you're a very small company and you're accustomed to working with, local people, this opens, look at Eileen, this opens a whole global opportunity of talent for you that you didn't have before.
Right.
And I will tell you this and I'm sure you guys will chime in, everybody's going to chime in on this one. You do everything you can to make sure you're making a great hire, but it still is like half chance, no matter what the statistics say. You can get really good at it, right? So we have a 3-to-1 interview to offer ratio. We've increased retention for clients substantially. We've worked with other companies that have done that on their own. But the truth is, a virtual hire, we don't see any statistics that they are a fail or a non-fail yet. We don't really have good metrics around it yet. But just from being in recruiting and doing so much hiring, it's not all that different. I do want to bring up too that there are some companies, it's so funny how this links back to diversity, because as we've all been challenged over the last couple of years about our own implicit biases, there's some interesting companies. One of them in the Valley is creating a virtual conferencing situation, but they're really aiming it towards interviews. And instead of having even avatars, which is what they specialize in. So I go into a meeting, you're not going to see Christine, you're going to see my avatar. A little weird. I did do an avatar in Second Life one time. It looked just like me. I was cracking up. I was watching The Office the other day because Dwight Schrute did that too. But mine looked just like you. I was going to say, just looks like you. But what they're doing is they're actually saying no genders, no avatar, pure beam of lights. So they've got beam of lights interviewing to a panel of beam of lights.
What a fantastic way, especially now as everybody's super focused on diversity and diversity and inclusion. I think that's phenomenal, right? Not having to identify as a specific gender and having the ability to, I can't tell if Brian's talking to us or if he's talking to his gardener.
Talking to his cat.
Not having the ability to not have to keep yourself in a box, basically, right? it's going to be really enticing to a whole new generation of workers.
Well, I think when you're interviewing on screen, you really are looking for talent, right? You're really taking a closer look at talent as compared to getting acclimated to being in this person's full presence and understanding. You can't see their shoes. You know what I mean? You can see other things about them, but you're really focusing specifically on what they're saying. You know, Lindsay, you can probably chime in here too, but I think I've been witnessing hiring managers that are making remote offers doing a better job, in my opinion, because they're really A, paying attention, and B, the things that they are discovering that they didn't discover before are more around capabilities than it is, you know, you don't like their shoes or you're not comfortable with somebody who isn't like you. So I think this is going to make us better as a whole. And, you know, I'd love to hear the statistics from our community about this and what you're saying and what you're hearing as well. Anything to add to that, Lynn?
I do think that hiring managers make a different commitment to themselves and candidates when they know from the very beginning that they're going to hire someone virtually, that they're going to be a remote employee. So I do agree that it will change the way that we are pre-screening, pre-vetting, you know, going through that process with our candidates. But I think it goes back to what Eileen said before. If this is our new normal, we need to make that commitment across the board. We need to make the commitment that this is how we are going to move forward. And then when that changes, yes, we have to change again. But for right now, it's the new normal. So this isn't an exception. This is now the rule.
Well, and I think that's the thing. There certainly, and as Eileen stated earlier, and I can tell you firsthand, many companies are in a hiring freeze because they don't know what to do. And a lot of that is because they don't know what to do from a management perspective. But there's also a huge cadre of people out there that are saying, I just don't know how to pull the trigger and hire. So hiring has not, contrary to popular belief, has not stopped. It's actually picking up in the remote sense, right? So remote hiring is picking up. And I think that, you know, once we get past these original fears and start to take a look at the people that we're bringing on and being a part, maybe as a TA leader, you want to sit in on the interview. Isn't it easier too, right? Because if we're in one state, our hiring manager is in another state, our candidate is in another location. Now, all three of us can be together easily in the room for each and every interview, which is something that our talent community has asked for repeatedly, right? You want to be in the room for the interviews, and you can't always do that. So this is a good way to set it. You know, you set it up, even the final interview, and you're included. Everybody's included. It becomes much more inclusive. I did love that line. And I do think we're going to see a spike in the flattening line of diversity because of this. I really do.
Absolutely. I think we're also going to see, I think what companies are going to be pleasantly surprised about is being forced to move to this remote working environment. I do think companies are going to see an uptick in productivity, right? It's, we all do it all the time, but for some of these smaller organizations or even larger companies that don't promote remote workers, I do think that they're going to see this, be pleasantly surprised by the increase in productivity coming out of their employees. So again, kind of a silver lining and with everything that's going on.
Brian, you're watching production really closely all the time, and we're seeing an increase just in the last 4 or 5 days even, that we've been, really analyzing what production looks like, what we expect production to look like. I mean, I don't know if you can speak more to that, Brian, but I know you've really kept an eye on that.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it, I'd say production, from what we've seen is definitely raised. Again, you don't have that time where you're traveling in the morning, you don't have that time when you're traveling in the evening, you're at your work location pretty much 24/7 right now. So where that extra time might have kind of, giving you that, distraction of not actually having to think about work, you're kind of jumping right in as soon as you get up. I mean, at least I know I am. As soon as I'm up in the morning, I'm jumping right into my laptop and I'm just starting the day. And then the same thing in the evening. Sometimes I'm almost forgetting what time of day it is. Next thing I know, it's 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, and I'm like, where did the day go? I mean, it's hard to even kind of make that break sometimes. But yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen everybody has really increased their production over these last few weeks, that I think everybody's in that same boat. They're there, they're doing it. You just don't even realize it.
And I will tell you, I did have an email from somebody asking me if we had a breakdown of the expenses that go along with trying to initiate remote hiring. We have it broken down differently, I think. But if anybody in the audience or any of our community have anything that can explicitly show that, great. I can tell you that it is not expensive. Just looking at our own expenses. And like I said, in these uncertain times, I would not, these weird times that we're in, I would not pull the trigger because I don't know something. Reach out to us and we'll help you get a solution and can try to connect you with somebody who can. But I think if we can keep hiring, our country, our world is going to pick up faster. So the faster we get over, and there's an obligation on our part. One of the things about being in talent acquisition that's the most frustrating to me is that we often don't get the acknowledgement, and sometimes we underestimate the importance of our jobs. When we start new people, one of the first things I say is that more than 99% of the world about employment once you're with us for just a few months. Think about the obligation there, right? Unemployment, I am quite certain, will hit 30%. This is really a time for us to step up to the plate. There was an article, I was so happy to see this, an article in The Economist, and it was about human resources, and it was about talent acquisition in these times. It was just the other day, and I was like, if you want to see it, it's on my LinkedIn page somewhere. And if you need a copy, just email me and I'll get it to you. But I was so happy to see, a periodical as established or mature as The Economist getting it. And it's time that we really understand and feel empowered by what we do, because our world is certainly dependent on it. We're the guys who know what to do, right? We just got to put our heads together and plow through this thing. So let me go round robin with the panel. And Brian, what do you got to say for us? I promise I won't give your phone number out.
No, I think the biggest thing out of this is definitely adapting to technologies that maybe you haven't had to in the past. Embracing them, definitely letting them work for you. And the great thing about it is that implementing these things is really super easy these days. So that makes it a lot easier to get these out to the masses of your employees. And I think being able to do that will just make bringing new people on and keeping in contact a lot easier for you.
Cool, Jess.
One thing I think is important too, when you're, if you're not used to doing this, map out a good process that's clear and that people can follow. Don't be afraid to tweak it as you go along. If something's not working right, then change it. And just keep in mind the effortless experience for you and your team internally.
Good one. And we'll talk about that on the next call. Eileen needs to jump. So what do you have there with your pearl of wisdom? Give me at least one.
So I would leave you with two thoughts. The first thought is going to be for all of our talent acquisition professionals and our hiring managers. Now is the time to ramp up your candidate care and your candidate engagement, right? Leave people feeling good about your organization, even if they're not ready now to join. They may be ready in 6 months. So that's critically important. And that's something that I've stood by, that candidate care and candidate experience for many, many years. Anybody who's worked with me over the years will tell you that that's always a focus of mine. The other thing I would say is we need to adapt to what's outside the box, right? Just because we used to do it that way doesn't mean we're going to continue to do it that way. So I think everybody needs to be a little bit flexible, a little bit compassionate, have some empathy that everybody's trying to figure this out. Not everybody is a pro at working remotely, whether they're, an organization or an employee, and we all just need to kind of adapt to what's outside of our square box that we typically live in.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And I know you have to jump, so go when you have to. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm sure we'll be talking again, maybe even later on today. Lynn.
I would say to from a recruiting perspective, all the recruiters out there, I know your workbenches are changing and you're a little unsure of what's happening, but just keep doing what you're doing. Network, talk to people. Like Eileen said, build those candidate pipelines, those candidates you haven't talked to in a few months that you know you're going to be able to place in a few years. Call them, tell them your story, make yourself up and the company you're representing a part of their story too. Don't forget about them, because they'll remember that you reached out to them when all this was going on, and that you didn't forget about them, and that you really showed them they're still valued. I think that's something our candidates are unsure of right now, and it is our job to reinforce that to them. So network, keep talking to people, and have great conversations with those candidates you know you're going to place soon.
Keep recruiting.
Yes, never stop recruiting.
Recruiting.
Never.
Yeah, and with the stimulus bill that should be passing, be signed tomorrow and be finalized, there's money that's coming out. So companies have not laid off TA the way we had seen in 2008. And I think that's smart. The talent shortage has not gone away. Let me make that really clear. I just want to reiterate. It's not, COVID did not all of a sudden create a bunch of developers where we need it.
No.
You know, that's not going to happen. So the actual talent shortage is as prevalent as ever. And if you are not engaging and you are not getting them in your pipeline, I know companies that we work for are. We're doing it. So you're going to be behind the 8 ball if you aren't in the forefront of that now. So I highly suggest that you look at that. I always enjoy hearing from people and would love to hear your questions. I keep trying to push people and connect them with other people that we know. In fact, now I'm relying on our whole team, right? We're all pushing people to people that we know that can give you answers. Please keep the questions coming, because the reason that we know there's a lot out there about working remotely, but we hadn't seen, and we had a lot of questions, and actually 2 different companies that asked us to do this presentation about how do you remote hire. I hope it's brought you some value. I want to hear what you thought about it, but what's next? Right. So what are the next questions that you're seeing and feeling? We know what we're hearing. We want to hear that from you too. And we'll push that out to the community. I'm going to try and do a webinar a week. So let us know the content that you want. I think we have 2 more chats here. Thanks, everyone. Eileen just told me by chat, stop touching your face. I'm going to have to, and thank you for all the thank yous and the kudos. So good seeing everybody. Stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.